Okay, so I'm gonna be doing a video tonight about I'm doing research on my family to try to find out more about me and about what happened when I was a kid and the secrets and the lies that the adults had around me. All these people are dead, so it's not like I'm ratting. And I was just typing in my family tree and all that other jazz. And so I grew up in New York City, in Queens, New York, right? And I knew some kind of weird shit was going on, but I was very young and I had really no clue what was going on. Not until now, after all these people are now dead. So my aunt, my mother, I shouldn't be airing dirty laundry, but my mother had a half sister and a half brother and a full blown brother. Is that what you call it? So she had three siblings, and two of them were half brother and half sister. And so I just started looking up everybody after my mother died because there was a lot of secrets and a lot of whisperings going on in my childhood that I used to eavesdrop in on, but I still had no clue what was going on. So this man that you see here was my aunt, who my mother, by the way, kept me away from. She did not want me to go near her, and I didn't understand why. And I always wanted to know my aunt. Really, I wanted to know my aunt in the worst way possible because every kid has a curiosity about their family members. My mother would not let me go near my aunt. As a matter of fact, at the funeral of my own uncle, who's going to be in this video, by the way, my mom told me if my aunt comes up to me, I was told to turn around and walk away. And I didn't understand why. And my aunt did come up to me. And I was like scared shitless that my mother was going to see her talking to me and I was going to get in trouble. I was a kid. And so I told my aunt I loved her. And she hugged and kissed me. And she wasn't as horrible as my mother made her sound. And so here's a story of the man she had married. My aunt went crazy. This is a true story. She married this man and went absolutely insane. They had a baby together. And one night, my grandmother got a call with my aunt screaming on the top of her, like I'm not kidding you, like screaming bloody murder, that she found the baby dead in the crib. And apparently, the baby died from SIDS or sudden infant death, whatever you call that, when they die in the crib. And yeah, I'm not very articulate, as you can tell. And so my aunt became so distraught that she became so depressed that she began doing drugs. And nobody in my family were drug addicts, but my aunt became one because the grief was so horrible that she couldn't bear to deal with it. And so my uncle, who was my mother's half brother, was best friends with her husband. And I didn't understand what was going on when I was a kid. There was a lot of weird things going on. So we're going to have a watch party. We're going to watch this. I did not watch this video. I watched maybe 3 minutes of it. And so we're going to find out things together. And I'm going to tell you if this guy who made this video is telling the truth or not from apparently what my memory was. All right, so let's go ahead. Now, this is my aunt's ex-husband. They ended up divorcing after the baby died, and she went crazy. And this is my uncle Tony's best friend. So let's go ahead. This is Angelo Seppi.
Angelo Sepe was born in Ozone Park, Queens, New York City, in the early 1940s. By the 1960s, he had already fashioned himself into a budding criminal, with numerous arrests for crimes ranging from robbery to possession of narcotics. He would be affiliated with the Jimmy Burt crew out of South Ozone Park.
Okay, and if you've ever watched the movie Goodfellas, did I just say it like that? Like a southerner? I'm from New York. Not Goodfellas. Goodfellas. That's what they're getting at here.
With the likes of Tommy DeSimone, Henry Hill, Anthony Stabile, and of course the Paul Vario crew out of Canarsie. Both crews operating under the Lucchese crime family umbrella. Hijacking trucks out of JFK and funneling in goods like clothing, cigarettes, meats, or anything else of value.
Okay, so far, yeah. Uh-huh. When I was a kid, I didn't understand what was going on. And one day my mother came home with a shit ton of T-bone steaks and filet mignons and lobsters. Like, I'm not kidding you. It wasn't like 10. It was more like 50 to 75. And my father bought a freezer, a gigantic freezer, and put it in the basement just to store all these steaks and lobsters. And when I was a kid, I was like, yay, steak. We really couldn't. We were a middle class family. We couldn't afford to have steak every day. And so every morning for breakfast, I would fry a fucking T-bone steak and have that for breakfast. Okay, so that's where we're going here.
Was these guys' bread and butter. They would often pay off.
And where do you think she got it from? She always told me, I asked her, Mommy, where did you get that from? She said, it fell off the truck. And I didn't know what the fuck she was talking about. What do you mean it fell off the truck? I pictured a truck and the door burst open while it was driving and a whole bunch of shit came flying out of it. That's what I thought, literally inside my head. But now I find out at 49, that is not what really happened.
Off truckers to buy their silence. But if that didn't work, they would kidnap them, confiscate their photo IDs, and threaten to kill them or their families if they...
Okay, that is true. That is the truth. I'll give you a story. So I probably told this before, but one day my dad was very, very lawful. I mean, this man never got a parking ticket in his life. That's how much he followed and respected the law. My father was the most, and he's still alive, was the most law-abiding citizen that ever lived. He would never do anything against the rules. And pretty much, he owned a small factory in Queens, New York, rebuilding car parts. And all his workers, most of his workers, were people from different countries. Let's just put it that way. Because a lot of Americans didn't want to work for less money. And so he had a lot of foreigners working for him. And one day, a Lebanese, I remember my father and mother talking, that this Lebanese terrorist threatened my father and my mother and I. And I didn't understand what was going on. I was a freaking kid. And so one day, my father had to take me into work with him because my mother couldn't watch me. So it sucked. I had to sit in a greasy car factory all day long, pretty much waiting until 5 o'clock rang around because I couldn't wait to get the fuck out of there. And we got in my dad's van, work van, and we're driving home when all of a sudden my dad noticed in the mirror, the rear view mirror, that somebody was following us. And my father made a left, he made a left. My father made a right, he made a right. My father went and did a U-turn. The guy did a U-turn. And so then my father stepped on the gas pedal. I told you he was very lawful. At this point, he had no choice but the speed to try to get rid of this guy who was on our tail. And we finally lost him. And then I remember my dad going home and telling my mother about this man that extorted him and went in his office, was a worker, and said to him, if you don't give me $20,000 in cash by next Tuesday, you and your family will be dead. And I remember my mother saying to my father, and I couldn't understand what was going on. All I have to do is make one phone call. And I was like, what? And I heard the story that apparently my dad called that worker into the office, but these guys that you see here in the video jumped out behind the door, beat the living shit out of him, and broke all the fingers in his hands, and pistol whipped him until his head split open, took his wallet and ID, just like they're saying here, out of his pocket, and said, oh, we got your mother's name and address, we got your brother's name and address, we got your whole family's name and address, and if you ever fuck with these people ever again, you'll be dead. And the guy shit himself and pissed himself in the chair, crawled out of the office while all the other workers watched, and we never had a problem ever again. Okay, here we go.
They spoke a word. Angelo Seppi was the nephew, through marriage, of Colombo crime family capo Thomas Shorty Spiro, and brother-in-law of Colombo associate Anthony Snake Rodriguez.
Okay, that's my uncle. And his name was never Anthony. This person got it wrong. His name was not Anthony. He was not, his born and given name was not Anthony. It was Tony. And they called him Tony Rod because his name was Tony Rodriguez. And basically, yes, he had snakes, loads of snakes. As a matter of fact, when I was a little girl, I loved snakes. You might think that's odd. I wanted a snake so bad. And my mother said to me, "You can't have a snake because I'm terrified of them." And I begged and begged and begged and begged. And she said, "No snake." And I said, "Well, fuck me," inside my head, because I wanted a snake. And so I was like really young, and I dug up in the yard until I found a big giant earthworm, and I walked around with it. And I said to my mother, "I got a snake." And I started chasing her with it, and she was screaming. And yeah, so I could not wait to go over to my Uncle Tony's house because he had exhibits, like these exotic exhibits with hundreds of snakes. He had asps, not an ass, asps. He had cobras. He had venomous snakes everywhere. There was at least 50, if not 100, different kinds of snakes. He had pythons that were 7 to 8 feet long. And I could not wait to go to his house to wear a python. And you might say, what? He'd place it around my neck, and I'd walk around with the python around my neck, and he would be smiling and beaming from ear to ear. And my mother, I would go run up the stairs, "Mommy, Mommy, look, I'm holding a snake." My mother would go running out the door, screaming down the block as I would chase after her with the snake. And my uncle thought it was the funniest fucking thing. And yeah, so he was not known as Anthony the Snake Rodriguez. It was Tony. So they're getting the story wrong right here, right now.
Seppi would marry Rodriguez's sister,
My aunt, the one I was told not to go near.
but that marriage wouldn't last too long. However, the criminal relationship between Seppi and Anthony Rodriguez would continue on throughout his.
It pisses me off when they call him Anthony. It pisses me off. He was not Anthony, if you know what I mean. They get this wrong every single time.
Criminal life. Seppi had criminal connections all over New York City, and criminality was his trade. He was described as being an unkempt, skinny man, just over 5 feet tall, with an obsession for harboring stray animals. One of Seppi's biggest issues was that he had a knack for always getting arrested. He wasn't exactly known to be a criminal genius, but despite.
Okay, I will tell you something about them. None of them were geniuses. Like you see in the movie Goodfellas, you could see they were not geniuses. None of them were geniuses. And I knew them, but, I was a kid. And so they were basically like blue-collar guys, if you know what I mean. They didn't walk around like you picture John Gotti with his Dapper Dan suits. They didn't wear shit like that. Well, my uncle, though, he did have a sneaker collection. I do remember when the cops raided his house once when I was a kid. I remember him calling my mother up and asking her to remove all the sneakers from the house because he had a penchant for sneakers. He had 100 pairs, and he always wore Adidas and Pumas and what was in style back then. And he really cared about his sneaker collection.
Despite his shortcomings, Jimmy Burke kept the young man around and treated him like a son. On Thursday, June 22nd, 1972, Angelo Seppi would be arrested for bank robbery. Him and 2 men by the names of Anthony Incarino and Richard Mascaro would be apprehended in the vicinity of 75 West Street, Manhattan's financial district. 2 officers reporting to a maternity call would see the 3 men dressed in construction outfits, with their guns drawn. They had just handcuffed a female courier, a security guard, and a teller, and grabbed over $48,000 from a satchel being carried by the courier. They would hop into a station wagon, but would soon be apprehended by the passing officers. Seppi would be sent to prison for the robbery, and would be released on parole in 1977. He would then get back to his old buddies on the streets of New York City, returning to his old hangouts like Jimmy Burke's Roberts Lounge on Lefferts Boulevard in South Ozone Park, and Paul Vario haunts like Gefkin's Bar on Flatlands Ave in Canarsie. In early 1978, Seppi would be arrested on Long Island with his ex-brother-in-law Anthony Rodriguez.
Oh, fuck, I didn't even know this. Uh-oh, what did my uncle do? You see, I'm watching this with you guys. As you can see, the red button, I'd never watched this before. So I'm finding out what the hell. Oh, my God, my family were criminals. Holy fuck.
They would be hit with drugs and weapons charges.
Drugs? My uncle never did a drug in his life. That's the honest truth. How do I know? Because you know. He didn't even drink. What the fuck?
He was already back to his old ways of getting caught, because he was too sloppy of a criminal. Luckily for him, the case would be thrown out due to issues with a search warrant. In time, he would be
And I will tell you, they had the best lawyers money could buy. I remember there was a famous lawyer that they had. What the hell was his name? I can't even remember. But it was like one of the most famous lawyers back in the 70s, and they had him.
recruited for perhaps his biggest criminal role yet, the December 1978 heist at JFK's Lufthansa cargo terminal. Louis Werner, a down-and-out degenerate gambler who had been employed at JFK's Lufthansa terminal for over a decade and had been suspected of looting cash from the terminal previously, had presented a plan to Martin Krugman, a hair salon owner and bookie who became friendly with Henry Hill and other criminals at Henry Hill's Sweet Lounge, which was just a couple of storefronts away from Krugman's salon on Queens Boulevard. Krugman told Henry Hill of the plan.
Speaking of Henry Hill, I never even heard of the fucking guy. I'll be honest with you. The comings and goings of my uncle and his friends, I've never ever once heard the name Henry Hill ever mentioned. And this guy was a total, I should talk because I'm sticking up for my own family. But this guy was an absolute degenerate lowlife. The biggest degenerate lowlife known to man. He was they were all basically degenerates, but he was the biggest degenerate of them all, pretty much. But I never heard them ever met. No, I have read in books that Henry Hill hated Angelo Seppi, my uncle's best friend and my aunt's ex-husband. Hated him, hated him, hated him, hated him. So there was sort of a rivalry between those two.
And soon Jimmy Burke, who was on parole and spending his nights at a halfway house, would take the reins and develop a plan to stick up the Lufthansa cargo and potentially make away with millions. Much of the plans being developed at Robert's Lounge on Lefferts Boulevard. The heist would take place after 3 a.m. on December 11, 1978. A gang of men in a van and backup car would make their way to the cargo terminal. The shooters who would carry out the actual robbery are said to include Angelo Seppi, Tommy DeSimone, Louis Cafora, Joe Manry, Robert Frenchie McMahon, and Paolo Licastri, who would invade the terminal and handcuff 9 employees. Others involved include Stephen Parnell Stax Edwards, Frank Burke, and mob turncoat and Bonanno associate Gaspar Valenti would also claim to have taken part in the heist during his testimony against his cousin, Bonanno capo Vinny Asaro, in 2015. Vinny Asaro was another man suspected of being in on the heist plans and a close associate of the Jimmy Burke crew. Many believe that Anthony Snake Rodriguez, brother-in-law of Angelo Seppi, also took part in the heist and may have been a shooter.
What? Oh, fuck. Oof. Okay. I'm sorry. I'm watching this for the first time, and be nice to my uncle, please. Believe it or not, you might think these are murderous people. Seriously, like really, really cruel and sadistic, horrible, degenerate, like criminals. But in real life, they didn't act like that. My uncle was the most funniest guy. He was really funny. Like, not like a clown there for your amusement, you know what I mean? But he was like, everywhere he went, everybody was attracted to him. I can't explain. Did you ever see somebody and they have star quality? My uncle had star quality. He was the most handsomest man. He actually looked like who is that actor? Eric Estrada from Chips. He was like gorgeous. He was a boxer. He was not a very tall man. He was probably about 5'7", 5'8". But you didn't want to fuck with him. Let's just put it that way. But he had a heart of freaking gold. An absolute heart of freaking gold. He was the kindest, most gentlest person when it came to animals. He loved animals. Besides his snake collection, he had dogs. He had parrots. He had all sorts of birds. He had cats. He loved animals. And he was kind. He was kind to me. I remember one 4th of July when I was all alone because both my parents were working and I had no friends really because I was a loner. And I was sitting in the house and all the other kids were enjoying themselves on 4th of July. The doorbell rang and I answered the door and he came with a huge, giant, hefty garbage bag filled to the top with thousands of dollars worth of fireworks. And he pat me on the head and he said, "Have a great day, kid." And then he took off. Yeah, that's the type of guy he was. He wasn't this murderous man you're thinking of.
It's a wild history, with numerous people said to be involved, and we certainly won't cover it all here.
And by the way, this is not my uncle. This picture is not my uncle. He did not have blue eyes. So this is like just some, like, I don't know, copy pasta. He got like some picture off the internet with a snake and a ski mask. This is not my uncle.
During Angelo Seppe's role as an armed mass robber, he would assist in tying up 9 employees, and he would tackle and pistol whip a shipping clerk by the name of Mike Hitchko, a man who had the keys to the goods they were looking for, and the crew had obtained prior knowledge of his scheduled arrival. As Hitchko's face leaked blood,
Listen to me. Most of these workers knew what was going down. Let's face it. Most of them knew. Most of the truck drivers, most of the cargo workers, most of the airline employees, all were in on it too. So don't act like, oh, the poor workers. You know what I'm saying? I feel bad for anyone that got injured, but trust me, a lot of these people were in on it.
he would start screaming, until Joe Manry put a shotgun to his stomach and told him to keep quiet. As many of you know, the crew would make off with close to $6 million in cash and jewels.
If it was $6 million, I didn't see my uncle living the high life. He probably got 5 nickels.
However, one of the biggest mistakes made during the heist was at the hands of Angelo Seppi and Tommy DeSimone. Both men had removed their ski mask during the robbery, and by December 13th, news outlets had put out word that authorities had 2 composite sketches of the robbers, those sketches being Seppi and DeSimone. Some of the things law enforcement say Angelo Seppi did after the...
Does that even look like them? Wait a minute, that does not look like them at all.
Those sketches being Seppi and DeSimone.
That doesn't even look like them.
Some of the things law enforcement say Angelo Seppi did after the heist included paying a car dealer $9,000 in cash for a new Thunderbird, buying a new Cadillac for a woman friend, and making a couple of large payments to bookies. An informant at the time had also reported that Angelo Seppi took a trip to Brooklyn and handed Colombo mobster and brother of Carmine Persico, Alphonse Alleyboy Persico, thousands of dollars in tribute money from the heist. On December 18th, 1978, Stephen Parnell Stacks Edwards would be found dead in his Ozone Park apartment. On the night of December 13th, just 2 days after the heist, the 1978 Ford Econoline van used in the heist would be found on a Brooklyn street after being ticketed. According to Henry Hill, Stacks was supposed to get rid of it, and in failing to do so, it would be Angelo Seppi and Tommy DeSimone who would pay a visit to his apartment and put an end to his life. In fact, as many of you know, over the next year, many connected to the heist will be found dead or reported missing, never to be found.
And my uncle was the only one that died of natural causes. Can you believe that? He was the only one that wasn't bumped off. And he died because he had a heart issue. And the funny part is you read story after story after story about my uncle Anthony, which was not his name, and how his snakes, his poisonous snakes, poisoned him to death. Not true. He had a congenital heart defect that his own son died from at the age of 32. And my uncle died at 30, in bed, while he was sleeping.
Angelo Seppi is believed to have played a role in other Lufthansa-related deaths, like the May 1979 deaths of Joe Manry and Robert McMahon, who were found shot dead inside Joe Manry's Buick, which is parked on Schenectady Avenue in Brooklyn. But before that, Angelo would have to answer to authorities about a suspected connection to the heist. In February of 1979, the FBI obtained a warrant to place a bug in Angelo Seppi's new Thunderbird, which they did.
And from what I heard when I was eavesdropping when I was a kid, because I was a nosy fuck, I heard that my mom, I think, was telling my dad, and my dad didn't want to know any of this, to be quite honest. He was Mr. Law-abiding. And she was saying that they would blast the Rolling Stones while they would drive around and blast like all sorts of rock music. So because they knew they were being bugged and they didn't want them to hear their conversations. So they would just blast music. Let's see if this guy got it right.
According to the FBI, Seppi would be heard vaguely discussing a murder and talking about buried money. However, it was hard to obtain clear discussions coming out of the vehicle. Apparently, Angelo Seppi would blast the music in his vehicle,
Yep.
either because he had an inkling that there was a bug in there, or that was just the way he rolled. On February 17, 1979, Angelo Seppi would be arrested by the FBI and taken to the FBI office in Queens. He would be charged with consorting with other parolees, such as Jimmy Burke, which was not allowed under the conditions of his 1977 release from prison. Burke was also a parolee. However, he was the biggest fish according to the FBI, and bringing him on a parole violation wasn't what they wanted. Better to get a co-conspirator like Seppi to hopefully cooperate first. After Seppi's arrest, they would raid 2 residences in hopes of finding money or jewels connected to the heist. One residence being at 10768 101st Street in Ozone Park, and another one being way out on Wickham Ave in Mattituck, Long Island. During questioning, Seppi, who was placed on $1 million bail, would of course be asked about his possible involvement in the heist, and be offered protection if he were to cooperate against anyone involved in it. No matter what the feds did, Seppi wouldn't crack.
That's right.
After weeks in federal custody, charges against Seppi would be dropped on Friday, March 23, 1979. Seppi proved himself to be a stand-up guy in Burke's eyes. He was safe and went back to work for Burke in cleaning up the Lufthansa mess. Until 3 weeks later, when Jimmy Burke was hauled in on his own parole violation. He would be asked about the Lufthansa heist, and of course plead ignorance. He would be released in January of 1980 and go back to the cleanup efforts. In 1980, after many of the Lufthansa conspirators had been killed or reported missing, Jimmy Burke would task Seppi with taking out a new target, Bobby Germain Jr., a young man who was going to cooperate against Henry Hill in a drug case. Bobby's father, Bobby Germain Sr., was a heroin trafficker and robber who had affiliations with Hill and Burke. Seppi allegedly shot and killed Germain Jr. after catching up to him in Kew Gardens, Queens. That same year, Henry Hill would be arrested on drug charges and cooperate against his old cohorts. Henry Hill would claim that the FBI had told him of a tape in which Anthony Stabile and Angelo Seppi discussed whacking him out, and urged Jimmy Burke to give him the permission to do so. It would be because of Hill's testimony that in 1982, Jimmy Burke would be sent away for his role in a college point-shaving scheme. Later, he would be given life for his role in the murder of Richie Eaton, a murder that Angelo Seppi was also suspected of being involved in. On January 27th of 1982, police would knock on Angelo Seppi's apartment door near West 12th Street and Avenue X in the Gravesend section of Brooklyn. At this point in Angelo Seppi's life, he had no doubt done, seen, and heard some strange shit in his days. However, what police would tell him after he opened up his apartment door might have been the strangest. Tuesday, January 26, 1982. Gravesend, Brooklyn, New York City. The police receive a call from a woman who states that a suspicious man is sitting in his Buick at the corner of Avenue X and West 12th Street. As police arrive at the scene, they approach the Buick at the corner of Avenue X and West 12th, and they spot a heavy-set white male with a mustache sitting inside. What they would find in his car will be described by authorities as a kill kit. A .45 caliber automatic, a 9mm Uzi submachine gun loaded with a 20-round clip, and an expensive pair of high-powered field glasses in the passenger seat. He would be taken into custody and held on $1 million bail. The man would be identified as Paul John Arthur, an Englishman born in Bromley, England in 1954, who arrived in New York City on the 20th of January, 6 days before his arrest in Gravesend. In the days prior, he had been seen driving around Gravesend. But who was he, and why was he there? John Paul Arthur would tell authorities that he was an antiques dealer and private investigator who made $100,000 a year in his business. A source close to the investigation would tell news outlets at the time that authorities, including the FBI and the Secret Service, were under suspicion that John Paul Arthur was in Brooklyn to kill a Mafia figure, but they would not say who. Law enforcement had also reached out to the Scotland Yard Police headquarters in London, who were also flummoxed. They would then search his Holiday Inn hotel room and find cash and a heavily used passport. They would discover that John Paul Arthur made numerous calls to a man named Richard Potvin, a French-Canadian tugboat pilot who was living in Florida. In the coming months, investigators would unravel an incredibly strange tale of international espionage, which unfolded on the streets of Brooklyn, New York City. Richard Potvin, the man who John Paul Arthur called from his hotel room, was working for a Haitian shipping firm and was suspected of being an international gun runner. Police would visit Potvin in Florida, and he would start talking to them about a man named Casimir Tavera, whom he knew as Ivan. He described Tavera as a French commando who was
What
also
the
involved
fuck?
in gun running. Soon, authorities would confirm that Tavera was in fact an intelligence operative who was working for NATO countries. Potvin said that he met Tavera in 1980 while working in the Netherlands. In November of 1981, he would get a surprise call from Tavera, who said he was in Miami and needed to meet. They would visit a gun shop where Tavera asked Potvin to buy guns for him. Potvin asked, "Why the hell do you need all these guns?" Casimir Tavera grabbed Potvin and pulled him to the side. He would state, "We need these weapons to take to New York City, to kill someone for the government. This person is very dangerous and has to do with an international crisis. If he is not removed, many people will die." Richard Potvin purchased the guns and would then have dinner with Tavera, where he would meet John Paul Arthur. Arthur and Tavera would then fly to New York City and return back with the guns after Thanksgiving. No telling what they did with the guns while they were in New York City. On January 18th of 1982, John Paul Arthur would contact Richard Potvin and tell him that he was coming to Florida to pick up the guns again. He would do just that, and then fly back to New York City, where he would join Casimir Tavera at the Holiday Inn. Things were going well until Arthur was arrested on January 26th, sitting in his rented Buick with a cache of guns near Avenue X and West 12th Street in Gravesend. But what's the point of me telling you this crazy spy tale of international gun runners, supposedly doing operations for intelligence agencies? As I mentioned previously, Angelo Sepe, who lived at Avenue X and West 12th Street, where John Paul Arthur was arrested, got a knock on his door on January 27th, 1982, just one day after the arrest of John Paul Arthur.
Oh, God, what do you guys want now? Ah, Mr. Seppi, how are you? You got a minute? Yeah, for what? What's going on? Did I do something now? Ah, relax, relax. You didn't do nothing. At least not that we know of. Yeah, so what do you want? Yeah, listen, we arrested a guy yesterday over here on West 12th and Avenue, right over here, West 12th and Avenue X. You heard about that? Not in you nothing. Yeah, this guy we brought in, he had a bunch of guns in his car, type of shit guys like you only dream about, And he seems to have been flown in from England. And the point is, we have reason to believe that he was here to kill you. Here to kill me? From England? That's what we believe, Mr. Sepe.
Oh my God.
Listen, I walk...
You gotta be shitting me. Hold on a minute. I'm filming a YouTube video. Oh my God. Okay, back to the video. Sorry about that. Family. Mi familia always bothers me.
by Avenue X and West 12 twice walking my dog yesterday. He could have got me then. Well, I'm just letting you know, Mr. Sepe, as of now, you seem to be the primary target. Let me tell you something. When my time comes, my own people will kill me. My people will not go out of the country.
Okay, this is where I think there's some kind of weird bullshit going on. Don't know how true this is because I was a little kid and knew nothing. But they keep saying Mississippi, Mississippi, Mississippi. My aunt was married to him from 1966 to the very early 70s, I believe. So how could this be Mississippi? Because I don't think he married again. But maybe I'm wrong.
Country and hire a stranger to do the job. They'll hire someone close to me. Believe me. Well, maybe so, but I'm just telling you what we believe. If I was you, I would watch my ass. At least for the time being. Yeah, my whole life is watching my fucking ass. Are you guys done? Well, for now. If you want to talk, you can come down to the precinct. We could, maybe you'll learn a little bit more about this character. Listen, I told you already. He ain't here for me. All right. You stay safe, Mississippi. And be careful out there, walking that dog of yours. The whole strange tale wouldn't be made public till a year later in 1983, when the Daily News put out a full spread on the matter. Angelo Sepe more than likely saw the story, or perhaps got a call from a fellow criminal, asking what the hell it was all about. However,
Wait a minute, I'm a dingbat. Was he living with his mother? Is that what they're saying, Mr. Seppi? Okay, I don't know. I have like attention deficit disorder. I'm probably trailing off, like halfway falling asleep while watching this.
for who these supposed intelligence assets were, as well as their real motives, it's not exactly clear. The Daily News would say, quote, "The CIA, as it's its policy, declined to say if it has any information about Arthur, but it has reportedly lent little support to the Arthur probe, causing some agents to believe that the CIA does not want them to solve the case. Arthur declined to be interviewed by the news when contacted at the Fishkill Correctional Facility. With time off for good behavior, he could be released by January 24th. If Arthur returns to England without talking, investigators said he will leave behind one of the most baffling cases here in memory." End quote. Angelo Sepe was one of the only ones left on the street connected to the Lufthansa cargo terminal heist. The only person ever charged with the crime was Louis Werner, the former Lufthansa worker who helped hatch the plan.
I don't think my uncle was ever charged for the crime either.
Moving forward, Angelo Sepe would start dealing drugs in the streets of New York City, but would fail miserably. The down-and-out, oft-arrested criminal would then resort to robbing drug dealers. In March of 1984, Sepe would be arrested for attempted robbery and handgun possession. He told officers that he was going to rob a drug dealer. In Ernest Volkman and John Cummings' book, The Heist, it states that when he was picked up for an arrest connected to robbing a drug dealer, Angelo Sepe would say, "Don't you know who I am? I'm the guy that robbed the Lufthansa." The book further states that police could do nothing due to a statute of limitations on the robbery charges. But they would try to speak further about the heist with Sepe, who would shut down, and the word Lufthansa seemingly left his vocabulary, as did any conversation about robbing drug dealers. Sepe would be released and told he'd be possibly facing a 15-year bid for his latest charges. He would still go back to robbing drug dealers and do anything to make ends meet. At the time of Angelo's arrest, he had been fully down and out. The man who once mingled with some of the most notorious gangsters of his era and helped accomplish the biggest heist in American history had been broke and living in a small basement apartment at the Shore Haven Apartments in Bath Beach, Brooklyn, where he was working security for the apartment complex garages. He was sharing his space with his 19-year-old girlfriend, Joanne Lombardo, a veterinary assistant, which was seemingly a good match for Sepe, who never stopped his obsession for taking in and caring for stray and injured animals. Wednesday, July 18th, 1984. It's just after 8 a.m. at the Shore Haven Apartments, located in Bath Beach, Brooklyn. The maintenance man for the complex prepares to enter the basement at the 8869 20th Avenue building. Inside, he would find 42-year-old Angelo Sepe and 19-year-old Joanne Lombardo.
It's not Sepe. It's not Sepe. It's Seppi. Seppi. That's how we used to say it. Seppi. Angelo Seppi. I love correcting people.
Shot dead, Angelo Sepe had taken several bullets to the face, and 19-year-old Joanne Lombardo had been shot in the throat.
So it was a good thing that my aunt wasn't married to him anymore. Let's just put it at that.
Angelo Sepe, the lifelong criminal and Lucchese-associated mobster who had skated free for his involvement in the biggest heist in American history and numerous murders, lost his life because, like many other guys I speak about on this channel,
He just couldn't get his shit together. Unfortunately, Angelo Sepe took a 19-year-old girl down with him. It's widely believed that in Angelo Sepe's desperate attempts to make money by robbing any drug dealer he can,
And the funny part is, my uncle was the one who had his shit together. He owned various video stores. He was an entrepreneur. He took care of his family. He didn't do drugs. He didn't drink. And what was my uncle doing with this dude? That's what I want to know. And I'll tell you, my grandmother, actually, when my aunt married Seppi, not Sepe, my grandmother thought that the mafia was glamorous because her own father was one of the head mafia people way back. We're talking, like in the 40s. I'm sorry, the 20s, 30s, and 40s. And so it was very glamorous. And she wanted my uncle to be like that. And so she pushed him to become friends with Seppi. Very sad, right? But my uncle was the only remaining person never to be killed. And he kept his life except for the fact that he had a congenital heart defect.
he finally robbed the wrong one that was heavily connected to the mob. However, there is other notions. In 1991, Genevieve's family associate and killer turned government witness, Peter Savino, would be questioned about the slayings. According to the defense, they had sufficient evidence that Savino had something to do with it, and that Sepe was heard talking about getting revenge against the Genovese family for killing his uncle, Colombo Capo Thomas Shorty Spiro, in 1980. Peter Savino would deny any direct connection to the slayings, but would say that he heard rumors that a friend of his took part in the slayings. Whatever the case may be, Angelo Seppi was right. When his time came, his people, meaning the Mafia, were not going to hire some guy out of England to whack him. They would get one of their own to do the job. And that they did. As Ray Liotta said in Goodfellas, it was real greaseball shit. And with that, I hope you enjoyed this upload. Please.
I did, immensely. Subscribe to this guy because he's gonna probably give me a copyright strike. And so this video goes out to my uncle, and his name was not Anthony. He was not a drug addict. He was not a drinker. He was a kind man, and he wasn't whacked. And here he is. And he died at 30 years old. God rest his soul. My mother never recovered from his death. He died on September 20th, 1987, in his sleep. And his son died at 32 and of a congenital heart defect that ran in the family. And very, very sad. And so here's his beautiful son. And you see right here, 30 years old. 30 years old. And so ends my story. These people mostly were degenerates. They were not the flashy John Gotti type of people that you picture. They were basically people trying to score some money. And some shit fell off the truck, and that's all I know. Thanks for watching. See you guys all soon, and so long.